Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Willies. This is a progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, progressive, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. We are an independent media outlet that, unlike mainstream media beholden to corporations, we only owe allegiance to you. Remember, you can also send me a tweet at EGBERTOWILLIES. That is at Egberto Willies. Let us engage. It is Politics Done Right. Welcome to Politics Done Right. We have a great program for you today. Michael Steele, how many more Americans after seeing this crap show continue to buy it? We need immigrants. Journalist María Hinojosa nails it with the proper immigration narrative. GOP Farm Bill show Republican priorities screw their own and the rest of us. Sad. Dana Bash's Tim Scott interview allowed him to validate MAGA lies without pushback. A response to the ICC arrest warrant request for Netanyahu. Sadly, 35,000 plus dead souls too late. And last but not least, I'm still calling for a Democratic landslide. Don't swear the polls or don't sweat the polls. Make the polls, meaning you have to go out and do it. So without any further ado, let's get busy. The mainstream media, whether on the left or the right, and I don't think any of them are on the left, CNN and MSNBC at best can be considered maybe center or somewhat right of center. But what's interesting is they always correct or try to give context whenever Democrats or progressives say something that's on the border or something that has that could be given more context. They generally do it to not leave the space open. But with Republicans, they give them a pass in stating things. They generally don't correct them as they should, etc. You know, Dana Bash in the past, I've seen her correct Republicans, not as much as she does Democrats, but this one here with Senator Tim Scott from South Carolina, I think is one of the worst interviews given, because not only did she allow him to misinform in MAGA manner, but she also gave him a long platform, free media, to put out lies, misinformation, etc., both about what Jewish students are going through on college campuses, and specifically about President Biden's mental state. She allowed it, and in fact, at one point, justified the statement. Check this out, and then we'll take it on the other side.
The reality is that, I mean, just using this case as an example, it's not two tiers if you have the Justice Department, which is the Justice Department, as Joe Biden is currently president, also going in to get classified documents into his house. And what I really am asking you about is the language being used, which is misleading. People like Steve Bannon called this an assassination attempt. Doesn't that kind of language concern you?
Well, I will simply say that watching the treatment of Joe Biden by the justice system, when they have found him unable to stand before a jury of his peers because he's too old, frankly, and his memory is shot. That is not the kind of simple, fair justice system that Americans expect. So it is very difficult to see this justice system currently playing out where it is fair to both Donald Trump and Republicans, as we've seen the kid gloves and the insulation around Joe Biden and his family. We all want fairness without any question, especially when Lady Justice should wear a blindfold, but we don't see that playing out, Dana.
Yeah, you're referring to Robert Hur and his report. That was one reason why they didn't prosecute. There were other reasons why they said they didn't prosecute Joe Biden.
A big one, though.
Well, okay. And I just want to, one last time, what I'm asking you about is rhetoric that could end up dangerous. And you keep answering about Joe Biden. So is there anything you want to talk about with regard to that rhetoric?
Well, the rhetoric that really concerns me is not coming out of emails. They're coming on college campuses when we're seeing the actual physical violence against our Jewish students playing out. What we're seeing is anti-Semitism spreading. We're seeing the spreading of hate. We're not having to figure out what's going to happen. We're actually seeing violence on college campuses. And yet the Democrat Party sits there, hands folded, letting it play out. We have to stand in the gap for those Jewish students. So I am very concerned about actual violence that we're seeing play out on our college campuses. Every single college president should hear me clearly. Your federal funding, it is a privilege, not a right. What is a right is for Jewish students to go to class safely, to study in libraries in peace. That's not a hyperbolic situation. That is actual facts on the ground on college campuses. So while rhetoric can be hampered, tamped down some, there is one place where we're seeing it manifest physically, violently, and it is disgusting.
I want to turn to
one of the important aspects of the media is to bring information in, be a arbiter of that information for the public whom you serve, and make sure that those who are providing that information do not mislead the audience. In this particular interview, Dana Bash completely failed at it because Tim Scott used her platform to completely spew lies. If you wonder why polls are so close today, which shouldn't be, given that in the case of Joe Biden, he's running against a lying, rapist, sadistic, and you can name all the adjectives that describe Donald Trump. This election shouldn't be close. But because we give, and the media specifically gives Donald Trump plausibility, because they give him the ability to normalize evil, normalize decadence, normalize all which is bad. We get close elections, not because Americans are bad people, but because they are severely ill-informed, misinformed, and disinformed. As you guys know, the ICC recommended that Netanyahu and the leaders of Hamas should be arrested on war crimes. I want to remind everybody, we all signed international laws, etc. A war crime, the collective punishment of a group, is a war crime. In other words, all of you Texans and Michiganders and Floridians that are listening to me right now, if you go ahead and if a very bad person harms or kill your relative, a relative of yours, let's say your daughter, your child, your whatever, and you go ahead and you said, because that person killed my child, I am going to go into someone else's home and kill their mother, their brother, their sister, and everything, because that particular family harmed our family. That's what collective punishment looks like. Another form of collective punishment is there are a whole lot of thugs that are running around Houston, and they all barricade themselves in the Galleria. As they are barricaded in the Galleria, they lock the doors to prevent innocent people from leaving, and they're hiding behind these innocent people. Houstonians, I want you to be honest with yourself. I want you to be frank and empathetic. If the cops decided they wanted those 10 terrorists so bad that are in the Galleria area so badly, and in as much as they're surrounded by 3,000 innocent Houstonians, and they came in with guns and bullets and bombs and just bombed until they are able to get to those terrorists, mowing down innocent babies, mothers, and children, that that chief of police, that whatever, would be charged with crimes above and beyond. They would be charged with murder for every single one of those people. Yet, sometimes, but one other thing, you would look. The reason you see that so as something that is so wrong is because you would take a look at those people as human beings, like you, your mother, your brother, your sister, or anybody else. Now, America, we like to call ourselves the moral authority of the world and the police of the world, etc. That's who we like to think we are. Unfortunately, it's something that our government never was. Now, individual Americans are good people. Most Americans are good people. I mean, if you doubt it, look at what happened during this our huge power failure where 1 million Houstonians were out of power. People with generators were throwing over lines to help each other. You know, my generator is running. Your refrigerator need to run. We give you some power to run your refrigerator so your food don't spoil. I saw all kind of good deeds being done by Americans. Americans are good people, but there's a militaristic flaw in our leadership. In our leadership that's full of testosterone is what I've always said. Why we probably need women to take the power on right now, because for some reason in general, maybe it's because women bear children, they don't have that machoistic killing spirit. Before we even talk about Israel, I'm from a country called Panama, and this still hurts to the core. Bush number one, we had a Panamanian general named Manuel Antonio Noriega. To the Americans, he was loved for a long time. While he did deeds for the CIA, they looked the other way, as he was also allowing the financing of drugs through banks in Panama and many other things that he did. But for the Panamanian people proper, one dictator here, one dictator there, no big deal, etc., etc., etc. But that's the one person that the first time he told no to the United States, they said, "How dare you?" And then they decided, now we're going to be serious about charging you for selling drugs to willing Americans who want to buy drugs from you. Well, he wasn't selling the drugs; he was facilitating the drugs. So the personal responsibility, we won't try to talk to Americans with that individualistic personal responsibility message. We'll come and get you because you're facilitating drugs to America. And to get that one person, according to the American government, 1,000 Panamanians got killed in that war, that semi-war. According to the UN, I think it was 4,000. Those of us who live in Panama understood that the places where the C-130s, the stealth fighter as it was being developed, and many other assets killed 10,000 Panamanians. A lot of people don't like when I use that number because they say, "Oh, you're hyperventilating." No, it was 10,000 Panamanians that were decimated by bombs, just as Israel has decimated much of Gaza. But in the case of Panama, there were several blocks decimated in areas that we had the Cuartel Nacional de Panama, Cuartel Nacional en Colón, and David. In other words, these parts of Panama and David that had the security guard. We didn't have a military security guard. They called them La Guardia Nacional, the National Guards. That's where America came and blasted and blew up everything. I watched as my father was running under his bed like he was a chicken because of the missiles flying over Arcoiris to get into Colón and hit the Cuartel. America can fire bombs from 3-4 miles away to hit the targets that they want. And they did that back in 1989. And my town, Colón, thousands of people died in not Marañón, but in Panama City. I don't remember the subdivision. Thousands of people died. The tenement buildings that surrounded the Cuartel Nacional, thousands of people died because they lived in tenements, but they were expendable. Nobody considered them human beings in the United States. And when the war was over, they kept the reporters out. They bulldozed everything, put it into mass graves, etc. No news media was out in the United States covering it, but it was covered elsewhere. So this, what Israel is doing is not anathema to what we have done to innocent people. These are war crimes, collective punishment. Noriega, all the dead Panamanians shouldn't have been dead to capture Noriega. They wanted to capture Noriega, and they were going to do whatever it was necessary to capture Noriega. Back now to Israel. The same is occurred. What Hamas did was terrorism, criminal. It was horrendous. 1,200 innocent Israelis murdered, killed, terrorism. And in response, Netanyahu and the IDF goes into Gaza. And the pretext was Hamas is hiding behind innocent people. Remember the Galleria in Houston? Would we allow our police forces or National Guard to blow the crap out of the Galleria to get those 20 or 30, 40 or 100 terrorists that are hiding behind 3,000 people? Would we sacrifice those 3,000 people? We know we sacrifice Panamanians to get Noriega, one person. We know we're capable of doing that. And likewise, it was done. It's what's being done in Israel. 60% of all buildings have now officially been blown up in Gaza. Under those rubbles, people talk about there are 35,000 people dead. There are more than 35,000 people dead when you look at the entire strip, that small strip of Gaza, and all the different towns in there that's been decimated. Thousands of people dead. I mean, are some of them Hamas sympathizers? Probably. Are some of them Hamas? Likely. But most of those people just want to get by with their lives. And because folks do not see the humanity in these people, anybody who looks at news other than the New York Times or the Washington Post, anybody who looks at news from around the world and understand what is going on, our brothers and sisters inside of Israel don't get the real news. They kicked out Al Jazeera. They stopped the live feeds out of Israel, Gaza, and it's elsewhere. It has to be smuggled now. You can't know what you don't know. You can't make decisions on what you don't know. But you also should never lose your humanity and your empathy. The Israeli papers are now reporting how, in fact, just like charging Trump with crimes have somehow increased his popularities with a sect in America, now that Netanyahu has been charged or they want to arrest warrants from the ICC, his popularity in Israel has gone up. What the hell is wrong with the world's morality? What is wrong where we cannot see death is wrong? What is hell is wrong? We have made killing, we have made collective punishment so vogue, or we have made it that it is now vogue for many. What is wrong with humanity? The people in the newspapers are saying, how dare them put Netanyahu at the same level with Hamas? All I say is open your eyes. Open your eyes. Compare the cities of Gaza or the territory of Gaza with Haifa, Jerusalem, Tel Aviv. People can still go and have their coffee. People can still go and drink their drinks. People can still go to their churches, their synagogues, their mosques in Tel Aviv, in Jerusalem, everywhere else. Even as rockets come from Gaza and the West Bank, they're protected by the Iron Dome. So life goes on almost, not completely, almost as well over there. But in Gaza, it's decimation, killing, bloodlet, and daily. I have somebody who calls into my morning program every single day, or rather my afternoon program. He goes ahead and he prints every single day the death count. Every single day, he reminds us of the death count, the injured count, and then he does a proportional analysis. Suppose this was the United States of America. I want you to think about that, my brothers and sisters. And by the way, criticizing the death of people, criticizing what's happening, do not let anybody tell you that being humane in whatever you have to do to be humane makes one anti-Semitic, racist, or otherwise. Just look at the numbers, look at the morality, and think about your empathy. Pro-corporate GOP Farm Bill decried. And that's where I want to start. Pro-corporate Farm Bill decried. And it's very important. Last week, what everybody was listening to is that Marjorie Taylor Greene and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Jasmine Crockett, they got into a big, nasty argument that seemed like a Jerry Springer show. And if you look at TikTok and if you look at Facebook, if you look at Instagram, that's all those outtakes are there. And by the way, I'll have an outtake on that piece as well. Why will I have an outtake? Because it is something essential to show, right? While everybody is hyperventilating about this cat fight, two women going at it, the most intelligent thing done on that stage was something by our Congresswoman, Jasmine Crockett, who used, look, I know, yes, she called the lady by a bad adjective, but she used the way she did it as to show the ineptitude of the chairman, to show the hypocrisy of the chairman, and nobody that I saw, at least in either the news media, the feed, the morning shows, really got it. They didn't get what this woman did. So when they asked her on the morning shows, do you regret what you did? And she said no. The next thing was, look at how they are. And they don't even regret sounding like Jerry Springer, not understanding exactly what she did. But we'll talk about that later if we get a chance. The real story right now is the Farm Bill. But you see, that story distracted from the proposed farm write-up that's occurring in Congress. Nobody's talking about this boring thing called the Farm Bill, though it affects more people that actually saw that Jerry Springer moment in Congress. First of all, that's why we are here. That's why we've got KPFT and Politics Done Right. So that we can point out to folks, both our urban folks or suburban folks and our farm folks, what's really happening. Title of the article that I want to highlight from Common Dreams last night, it's GOP Farm Bill decried as pro-corporate, anti-family waste of everyone's time. And they came to this, I think they wrote this article on Friday. It was right after that mix-up. But it goes like this. Echoing early May criticism of House Republicans' blueprint for the next Farm Bill, anti-hunger and green groups on Friday fiercely condemned the GOP's discussion draft text of the Farm, Food, and National Security Act of 2024. That's where you get, how much people are going to get on SNAP, what kind of subsidies farms are going to get, etc. Released by the U.S. Committee on Agriculture Chair Glenn G.T. Thompson, Republican of Pennsylvania, the draft is competing with a Democratic proposal, Senate Agricultural, Nutritional, and Forestry Committee Chair Debbie Stabenow, Rural Prosperity and Food Security Act, while Thompson claimed that his bill is the product of extensive feedback from stakeholders and all members of the House, and is responsive to the needs of farm country through the incorporation of hundreds of bipartisan policies. Representative David Scott, Democrat of Georgia, the panel's ranking member, said the draft confirms his worst fears. Let's point out, because when we talk about stakeholders, a lot of times people don't know what we're talking about. When it comes to a farm bill, who are the stakeholders? The stakeholders are the big agri corporations. It is you, anyone receiving SNAP, anyone receiving food benefits, international relief agencies receiving food for, let's say to prevent starving in different places. By the way, if we can prevent starving in places where we were partially responsible for their starving, it means that we wouldn't have an immigration crisis and many other things of that nature. So all these things tie in. Your policy, the policies that you pass, have effects long beyond the immediacy of the policy that's being written. So a person writing intelligent policy goes ahead and he looks through several levels of indirection. He or she says, all right, if I pass this, what happens? What then happens because of that other thing happening? You have to see what the cascading effects of your policies are. And it turns out, rural brothers and sisters, anybody listening to me that isn't in the big cities, etc., listen well, because this affects you. And the Republicans are not your friends. Remember, right here in Texas, they are doing what again? They're shutting down your hospitals with not accepting the Medicare expansion to the Affordable Care Act. Remember, they're shutting down your farms. And with this bill, we'll show you further. So as they speak about the conservative farmers supporting these Republican folks, remember who's taking money out of your pocket and food out of your mouth, and who are making sure that the monies that you get, the prices you get for your crops are lower than they should. How many farmers out there? Price of everything has gone up. The price of food, vegetables, everything is high. I would love if we were paying these high prices so that our farming brothers and sisters in rural America were making more money. If you were making that 30-something% or more that food prices has gone up over the last several years, if you were making the excess profits from that guy, I would kindly and happily say this is one place it's good for food prices to rise as our wages rise, because right now our wages are rising faster than inflation. So if that's the case, the inflation that I love is inflation that raised the prices of food, if that price is going towards getting a better way of life for our farmers, right? That's how it's supposed to work. Increase in food prices should mean an increase in wages for farmers, right? That's what it should mean. For people who are picking the fruit, for people who are growing the fruit, for people who invest in it. And that's what something like a budget, that what we're talking about here, the Farm Bill, that's what they're supposed to do. But señores, mis amigos y mis amigas, that's not what's happening. All right. House Republicans plan to pay for the Farm Bill by taking food out of the mouths of Americans' hungry children, restricting farmers from receiving the climate smart conservation funding they so desperately need, and barring the USDA from providing financial assistance to farmers in times of crisis, he warned, referring to the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Now, here's the deal. Our corporations, specifically, oil corporations, don't want anything done about green energy. They don't want to produce green energy. They don't, because digging up for oil and coal out of the ground is cheap. So their profit margin is huge. Green energy, until it's ramped up very well, it's not going to be there. So we continue to burn oil. We continue to burn all these things that create climate change. And in the process of creating climate change, you get more derechos, like we got here in Houston, that knocked out power for a whole lot of people. A lot of people are still without power. It causes damage. It causes hurricanes. It causes damaging winds that go through the crop of our breadbasket, and knocks down a large percentage of our brothers and sister farmers' crops. And in the process of still subsidizing these companies that damage our environment, and now removing subsidies from farmers, which would help during disasters like the derechos and the other problems that are created by our burning of fossil fuels, we are still subsidizing these companies as we go ahead and cut our farmers. And farmers, you're still voting Republican? You're still voting to support your demise? If you think this is some sort of a fluke, I'm going to jump from this article to another article. And this one is old because this tells you the way of thinking. This one goes to the U.S. Agricultural Secretary, October 2nd, 2019, under former President Trump. The Trump administration message to small farmers: go big or go home. Sonny Perdue, President Trump's agricultural secretary, said Tuesday during a stop in Wisconsin that he doesn't know if the family dairy farm can survive as the industry moves toward a factory model. And you know that factory model, what happens to it? It's subsidized by your government, our tax dollars. In America, the big get bigger and the small go out, Perdue said after an appearance of the World Dairy Expo in Madison. I don't think in America for any small business, we have a guaranteed income or guaranteed profitability. No, we don't. Purdue's visit comes as Wisconsin dairy farmers are wrestling with a host of problems, including declining milk prices, rising suicide rates, and the transition to larger farms with hundreds of thousands of animals and Mr. Trump's international trade wars. Let me tell you what the trade war did. The trade war told the milk farmer, because here's the deal. I already told you, we put in tariffs on China is the worst thing. When Trump did it, I decried it. And brother Biden is doing it now, and I'm decrying it. Let's give an example here. You put those tariffs on China, China gets pissed off. Just like we supposedly get pissed off because they are dumping steel here. What China said is, okay, you want to put tariffs on the steel? We'll simply stop buying milk. So, my rural brothers and sisters, when those tariffs went on that Trump put on China, you know who paid the price? Every American paid more for products, but farmers could no longer sell milk. 43% decline in your milk. Okay? And what happens then is we went ahead and hear the people say, well, guess what? The family farm just can't survive. So he went to Wisconsin and said that. It behooves me how poor Democrats in Wisconsin were in campaigning appropriately to show what's happening with GOP policy that specifically hurt GOP and other supporters. We got to get better than that. We got to get smarter than that. So again, you have the agricultural secretary for Trump telling small farmers, "Hey guys, there's no room for you guys anymore. We can't. The trend is to get bigger, not smaller." So the person who wants to have a small family farm and still play a part. And by the way, small family farms are the way to go. It is not more efficient than large farms because large farms take advantage with their size, but it's more sustainable. And why is it sustainable? Remember when we had the baby food crisis, when you concentrate into one factory, one owner, etc., when that one thing has a problem, it affects the entire system. When we have a whole hundreds of thousands of family farms and family cattling and family, all these things, we spread risk. What is supposed to be capitalism? The efficient allocation of resources. But guess what? The efficient allocation of resources can actually cause your demise. Yeah, big, huge factories are more expensive than running a whole lot of small factories, but it's very, very dangerous. So the Farm Bill continuing with the Farm Bill. Leaders at advocacy groups on Friday similarly slammed the Republican bill. T.Y. Jones, Cox Vice President for Food Assistance at the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, reiterated her previous condemnation of GOP attempts to cut the benefits of hungry families, saying that this is unacceptable. Congress should reject it. I am pretty sure Congress will reject it if Americans are informed about not what's happening with Jasmine Crockett, not what's happening with MTG, not what's happened with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, but the damage these companies are really doing to all of us. I bet most of you had no clue this disaster was occurring in Congress as we watch the spectacle, as we watch a spectacle of a Trump trial, as we watch the spectacle of Marjorie Green Taylor, or Marjorie Taylor Greene, MTG, Marjorie Taylor Greene. But these are things as they keep us entertained. You know, there's this stuff called bread and circus. There's this thing. I was a member of the group called Move to Amend as a board member, and we went around the country and we had all these activities to try to make people aware of what's occurring. We were trying to get this past the 28th Amendment, which says corporations are not people and money is not speech. And to do that, we figured we have to educate the population as to how their government works. Civics isn't taught in school hardly anymore. And there was this skit that one of our Utah Move to Amend did, where they talked about bread and circus. Keep you fed and entertained, and then they can do anything to you, which is where we're at right now. America, in as much as our food is expensive compared to how it was a few years ago, it's still the cheapest in the world, okay, relative to what we make. And here's the funny thing. The funny thing is that they give us cheap processed foods. They entertain us with these real, what they call it, real programs, reality-based programs, and things that don't make you think, just entertain you. You know, I remember every time I'm sitting down here blogging, if I accidentally turn from a news channel in the past and turn to a Jerry Springer, it's amazing how attractive Jerry Springer was for its decadence. That is what they want to do. Keep you entertained as they screw you. Keep you fed as they screw you. They screw the farmers and everything else. And this is not conjecture. This is just, we've proven.
We spend a lot of time deconstructing the news, trying to parse it into a form that everybody can understand. We try to find those little nitpicks where it flies above the fray, etc. If you really like these videos that we do, I want to ask a big favor. Please go ahead, number one, subscribe to our channel, and number two, please join if you can. Thank you so kindly for watching. Keep watching. Please remember to share. We must populate the entire internet with our progressive message, a message that we know is what most Americans say that they want. So help us, please join.
One of the reasons to have competent and diverse journalists on one staff or giving or providing the news to us all is because specifically what you're going to hear here with María Hinojosa. She gave the immigration issue context, and more so how it is necessary for a dwindling population of native-born Americans. Check this out, and then we'll take it on the other side.
My whole thing is that the economy is such an important conversation right now. You know what would happen if, for example, the 10, 11 million undocumented immigrants now were all given a pathway to citizenship? It would affirm the American economy. It would grow the American economy.
These are the ones who have been here many times, many of them for decades, that essentially have been vetted. They're contributing to our economy from an underground economy level.
Correct. Also, what's interesting, Jose, about the border, because you used that word vetted. So what's happening on the border right now, I just got back recently, is that people are giving themselves over to the Border Patrol. You remember how when we reported this, it was, you run away from the Border Patrol, right? That's not happening, Jose. La gente se está entregando. They are literally crossing. They're looking for the Border Patrol to say, take me, with hands up, by the way. So this notion of criminal element, underground, trying to sneak in, no. What is inept, Jose, and you and I know this because we've been around for a while, is how is it possible that an organization like the Border Patrol still doesn't know what it's doing? That still the only thing that they can seem to do is gather up, disperse, bring in some migrants, hold them. It's a complete confusion, Jose. It's the largest law enforcement agency in the country.
Why is there no clear first of all, clear statement of law, of policy, and then of basic humanity.
Well, I would say this to President Joe Biden, right? This is a moment for him because what's happening in Capitol Hill is just impossible. Yes, an executive order. Actually, yes, Joe Biden saying, I'm not buying into the narrative of immigrants and refugees being a threat. We know that they're actually good for our country. That's why I'm putting through a comprehensive immigration reform executive order. Bring everybody on. It would change the narrative of our country.
You know that the Republicans, 5 seconds after that, would go right to the courts.
Yeah, but the thing is that all of the data shows what we know. Immigrants help the American economy, and they are not bringing crime.
Maria nails it. What would this country be without immigrants? Most of the work, skilled labor, etc., that we have in many towns are provided by those who've come over here to make a better life, and in doing so brought their skills with them. And again, right now they're being used as a red herring. Right now they're being used as people who are taking employment away from others, not realizing that when the numbers are done correctly, that it's a net positive to the country's economies. But, even if it weren't, whatever happened to compassion? Whatever happened to empathy? Whatever happened to the shining light that the United States likes to purport itself to be? Again, we have to try to bring a country where the rhetoric meets the reality. And so far, we are far distant from that. Michael Steele nails it. First of all, he points out that the reason you have all those politicians parading to New York to be with Donald Trump is that he doesn't have the backing of his family. So they have to create some sort of a charade because they also know that they want something out of Donald Trump. And so he goes ahead and he pulls the strings and they're there. But I mean, at the end of this piece, this clip, Michael Steele says the most prescient thing, and it's the one that I am betting Americans are going to see, but we'll see. Check this out. We'll take it on the other side.
I love the factionalization of the Republican Party right now. More of it. More, please. More, please. It's good because what it will expose is just how deep the rot is in the party. And they will, at some point, as this race will illustrate, there's more of this to come, particularly if Trump wins, where they're going to start to eat each other, cannibalize each other in primaries, because this is the signal that the new dawn is upon us. The new age of Trumpism is upon us. And this race is a good example. So Good is who was there first, to put it that way. He's got the interlopers coming in who's running further to his right. And I think you'll see more of this around the country. And of course, coming to New York.
What does that even mean now, though, right? I mean, because you used to say, this person's more conservative.
Yeah, it doesn't mean anything. It just means that, you may kiss Trump's ring. I'll kiss something else. That's basically what it means.
And the VP audition?
The VP audition is laughable because Trump knows who he wants. So if I can get you to tap dance for me for free, guess what? You're going to tap dance, and I'm going to help you do it and make you do it. And I'm going to incentivize you to do it, which is what he's doing. The word went out in the party, very simply put. The beginning of this trial was such that no one was there, not even his family, noted. Not even his family. So they found Eric and said, Eric, you got to go sit behind Dad. And he was like, okay. And then Laura showed up and she's there. But then that wasn't enough because the wife isn't there. And the sons aren't there. Where's Ivanka? She's not there. So the word went out, we need to send in the reinforcements. So everybody in the party now, giddy up and galley up to New York. And we're going to do the walk-in together. We're all going to walk in like something out of, an NBC crime story, behind. You can just hear the dum-dum behind them as they come through the door. And the reality of it is they look foolish, particularly when you show up in the same suit, same shirt, and same tie. And the reality, again, speaks to the point that everyone right now, particularly those auditioning to be his VP, think that they have the edge. And by doing this, by debasing themselves, by, capitulating and going out in front of cameras and saying the foolishness that they say, that Donald Trump is going to love them more than the other. And in fact, he doesn't give a damn about any of you, because he knows you'll do whatever he wants you to do. And at the right moment, he's going to say, the rest of y'all step down, but still do what I need you to do. I'm picking this one. And they'll do it.
But they're not just debasing themselves. They're fundraising from the courtroom. You have Laura Trump.
Well, you can debase yourself and fundraise too.
There's many ways to do it. But look, you have Lauren Boebert already fundraising off of it. I mean, in some ways that is making a mockery of the entire system.
Well, they mocked it from the very beginning. Their whole shtick is to mock the system, to go tear it down, and to make money off of that. That doesn't distress me. None of that distresses me. The idiocracy is the idiocracy. What I'm bothered by is how many more Americans, after seeing this crap show day in and day out, continue to buy it. And they think the threat is Joe Biden, when the threat is already in the house.
Michael Trump nails it. The question is, will enough people continue to buy the charade, buy the crap, and really think that the threat to the American democracy, the threat to the American way of life is Biden? Or will they open their eyes and see the clear and present danger that Donald Trump represents? I mean, his past presidency was a failure. Believe it or not, the pandemic indirectly, as much as he botched it, it could be the thing that have most Americans forget about all the crap that he did pre-pandemic. That was just exacerbated by the pandemic, but can be covered up by using the pandemic. Will Americans realize that? I am betting that if enough of us go out there and do the job that we're doing right here, go out there and inform, go out there and tell, go out there and point things out with real world stories, that it will make a difference, and that the landslide I continuously am talking about, the landslide that I'm inching on, will actually be realized. Stay tuned. Recently, a New York Times Siena poll came out that sent Democrats freaking out because it seems like the president is flailing in the Midwestern states and the states that are going to decide the election, what we call it, the swing states. And, I looked at the polls, and my thing was, it's not that the polls are wrong. That's just how they conducted the poll doesn't really reflect what the likely voter model is going to be, or, where people are. And, I said that to myself, and I continue to hold to the belief that by the time we get down to November, we are not going to have a close election. I repeat, we're not going to have a close election. It's going to be a Democratic landslide from the bottom all the way up to the top, if we do what we are supposed to do. Remember, the right side of the equation has no policy. And once it's pointed out to the American people that there is no policy there, and that their personal economy, their health economy, and all these other economies are in danger, at that point, they will start really taking account to what needs to happen. And that means a landslide victory for the middle and left side of the aisle. Listen to these two pollsters, John Della Volpe and Larry Sabato, because these guys have been more right than wrong. Check it out, and then we'll take it on the other side.
Last week, a New York Times Siena College poll found that Trump was leading Biden in 5 out of 6 battleground states. And those numbers got a lot of attention. But I have 2 guests standing by who have some serious questions about that polling. Larry Sabato from the University of Virginia says he laughed when he read the result for Nevada. How could Trump be ahead by double digits in a state that has gone blue for 2 decades? And John Della Volpe, who runs polling at Harvard's Kennedy School, asked how Biden could be 24 points ahead in the Wisconsin youth vote, but 27 points behind in the Michigan youth vote. There are more questions where those came from. Larry, walk us through this, because when these polls come out, these polls carry the narrative for a good week and a half till the next polls come along, and not enough people are saying, hold on a minute. How are these polls actually conducted? So you say you laughed when you first saw this. Why?
Because the result's absurd. That's always a good test for polling. And I know John has looked at this too. So many of the internals are directly contradictory. You mentioned one. It's true with young people. It's true with elderly voters. It's true with minorities. 23% of blacks voting for Trump. Please get real. And here's the problem, Stephanie. It's not so much that there are polls being taken. There will always be polls taken because it's clickbait, and the news organizations make lots of money on this, or they at least claim they do. It gets lots of attention. And you're right. We had, I'm not exaggerating, I personally saw 100 references to this poll in print and on TV pundit panels. And somehow the narrative changed overnight from this is a very close race, why it's just going to be a handful of votes in 6 or 7 states, to, boy, Biden's losing. He's doing terribly. What can he do to turn this around? No, nothing major changed. It's May. The election is in October and November. I just have to remember something. I'm old enough to remember when Senator Gene McCarthy in 1963 very wisely said, the press is like a bunch of blackbirds on a telephone pole. When one moves, they all move. When one comes back, they all come back. Safety in numbers, but boy, is there a lot of groupthink in the press. I'd love it if they mixed it up more and disagreed, but apparently they can't argue with numbers published by the great New York Times.
Well, we're mixing it up right now, my friend. John, what makes you doubt this poll?
Well, many of the same things that Larry mentioned in terms of these internals. When something doesn't make sense, that gives me pause to take a step back and to compare these internal numbers time after time after time, consistently within the New York Times poll or across other polls. And not just did we see 51-point differences between Michigan and Wisconsin, but we saw similar 50-something point differences among younger people in Arizona, in Nevada. I spent a lot of time talking to younger people. I spent a lot of time talking to older voters, and I just don't see that variance from state to state to state. We have to remember, Stephanie, as Larry indicated, polling is much more than averaging a bunch of horse races. It's much more than informing betting markets. Doing our job well means informing our democracy. It means giving voice to the people. And my concern, when we have inconsistency state after state among younger folks, among Hispanic folks, among older folks, that's not doing our job in terms of public opinion researchers. And that's the message I think that's so important to recognize in this conversation.
John, you wrote last week, quote, if I misrepresent an X-ray or an MRI, it doesn't mean the medical imaging is broken. It means I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not a doctor. Same with polling. What do you mean here?
What I mean is that there's a cottage industry on people on social media who are analytics experts, and they believe by averaging horse races, they can interpret public opinion. And they then say public opinion is broken. I'm not saying that public opinion or polling is broken. What I'm saying is I know how to fix it. And the way in which you fix it, if it is broken, the way in which you fix it is to develop samples that are representative of all of the subgroups that make up the electorate. Okay, so I'm not going to look at X-rays and say and have an opinion on X-rays and say if I miss one that all of imagery is broken. Okay, I'm not a physician. Just like most of the people on Twitter are not pollsters. To do polling well, it's just not about averaging numbers. It's about pulling the samples, listening to people, and making sure you have a consistent voice throughout the survey.
Well, polls are not the only way we hear from voters. Obviously, reporters interview them. There are focus groups. Do we focus too much on polls, Larry?
Oh, absolutely. And I agree with the way John has phrased his concerns about this, but I would add something far broader. John mentioned democracy. That's what worries me. And it ought to be worrying everybody. All this money and energy and space devoted to polls where the numbers are going to change many, many times between now and the actual election, instead of having, say, a front page article on what Trump said over the weekend about his third term. The Constitution doesn't permit that. In fact, he mentioned FDR, who had 4 terms. Or a few hours ago, Trump posted on social media a couple of articles that talked about the Third Reich, the unity of the Third Reich, or maybe it was the Fourth Reich, but it was the Reich. Hey, this is significant. You know, we're listening to him. Listen to him. He's telling us what he is and what he wants to do. That should be the front page article, not what some poll showed overnight in Nevada or Wisconsin, which may or may not be accurate, or which may or may not hold up even for 3 days.
Now, folks, like I said, if you look at the polls, and I love what Villapolfe and the other guy said, they saw the poll and it was like, ha, 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 really now? Come on. And you know what? For anybody who says, remember the way when you attacked the right for having the skewed polls and talking about skewed polls, and it turns out the polls weren't skewed at all. The Democrats won in landslides. This is not the same situation at all. We're not talking about skewed polls. We're talking about real polls. Here's the thing. These are the same polls that made you believe the abortion bills or I think it was a constitutional amendment in Kansas, in Kentucky, in all these places were actually going to be a close fight. Somehow it's going to be close. And all these issues won in landslides. Because when folks went behind that curtain or in the privacy of their voting booth, what they said to themselves is, I have to live 4 years with this choice. Am I going to run the risk that my daughter, in case she comes out with an unexpected pregnancy, that she cannot protect her personal economy? If I turned out that I need that the only way for me to have a kid is to have IVF, in vitro fertilization, that I can't do it. If I let this 4 years go and find out that I probably won't be able to have contraception, if I find out that the free press is free no more, if I find out that if I speak against certain governmental agencies, that I can be sued or I can have the IRS sicked after me. When you start putting all these things into perspective, and the truth of the matter for once, the left side of the aisle has the money to publicize that. But even if they didn't have the money, crowdsourcing is up and ready to go at the opportune time to put the message out. So for those who are hyperventilating about the polls, don't. But you got to get to work now. Because you're not going to win by sitting down being scared in your couch. You're going to win by being an active participant. You're going to win by making sure those who have the fund to fund organizations pushing the message, like yours truly and others, you fund. You make sure that those organizations are able to do the job. Not paying big time consultants, but paying those who can get that message out, and get that message out often, accurately, truthfully, and morally. So folks, don't fret the polls. Make the polls.
We spend a lot of time deconstructing the news, trying to parse it into a form that everybody can understand. We try to find those.
All right, folks, I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you have an enjoyable rest of your day. Remember, you must engage. Political involvement should be a requirement for citizenship. That's a permutation of a statement I've made all of the times, from my websites to my blogs to my books. We must engage. We must engage with everybody, not just one side or the other, because our democracy depends on us engaging each other. Capitalism depends on us being at each other's throat. Don't forget that.
We spend a lot of time deconstructing the news, trying to parse it into a form that everybody can understand. We try to find those little nitpicks where it flies above the fray, etc. If you really like these videos that we do, I want to ask a big favor. Please go ahead. Number one, subscribe to our channel. And number two, please join if you can. Thank you so kindly for watching. Keep watching. Please remember to share. We must populate the entire internet with our progressive message, a message that we know is what most Americans say that they want. So help us.